The Faithful Wait. Chapter 1. The Last Goodbye. The sun was setting over the small town of Millfield, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Sergeant Daniel Carter knelt in front of his golden retriever, Max, scratching behind his ears one last time. "I'll be back before you know it, boy," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Max tilted his head, his warm brown eyes filled with trust. He didn't understand war or deployments, only that his human was leaving. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Carter, stood by the door, her hands clasped tightly. "We'll take good care of him," she promised. With a final pat on Max's head, Daniel shouldered his duffel bag and walked toward the waiting car. Max whined, straining against his leash, but Mrs. Carter held him back. The car pulled away, and Max watched until it disappeared around the corner. Then he sat and waited. Chapter 2. The days turned to years. At first, Max waited by the door every evening, ears perking up at every passing car. Mrs. Carter would sigh and stroke his fur. "Not today, Max," she'd say softly. Months passed, the seasons changed. The leaves fell, snow covered the ground, and flowers bloomed again, but Daniel didn't return. Letters came sporadically. Mrs. Carter would read them aloud to Max, her voice trembling. Daniel was okay, but his unit was stationed in dangerous territory. The war dragged on. Max didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. His human was still out there. So, he kept waiting. The townspeople noticed. Millfield was small, and soon, Max became a familiar sight, sitting on the porch, watching the road, never giving up. Some brought him treats, others patted his head sadly. "Still waiting, huh, Max?" Old Mr. Jenkins from the bakery would say, tossing him a piece of bread. Max would wag his tail, but his eyes never left the road. Chapter 3. The Longest Winter. Years passed. Max's muzzle turned gray and his steps grew slower, but his routine never changed. Every morning he'd eat, then take his place by the door. Every evening he'd watch until the last light faded. Mrs. Carter aged too. Her hands shook as she poured Max's food, her eyes often red from crying. The letters had stopped coming 2 years ago. The military had listed Daniel as missing in action, but Max didn't know what that meant. One bitter winter night, a snowstorm raged outside. Mrs. Carter called Max inside, but he refused to move from his spot on the porch. She draped a blanket over him, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You stubborn old dog," she whispered. Chapter 4. The Distant Figure. 5 years after Daniel left, the war finally ended. Soldiers returned home, some cheering, some silent, some carried in coffins. Millfield held a small parade. Max watched from the porch, his tail giving a half-hearted wag at the noise. He didn't care about the crowd. He only cared about one person. Then, a figure in uniform stepped off a bus at the end of the street. Max's ears twitched, his nose lifted, sniffing the air. And then, he knew. With a strength he hadn't felt in years, Max bolted forward, his old legs carrying him as fast as they could. Daniel saw him too. He dropped his bag and fell to his knees. "Max!" The dog crashed into him, barking, whining, licking his face as if making sure he was real. Daniel buried his face in Max's fur, sobbing. "I'm home, boy. I'm home." Chapter 5. The Final Wait is Over. The townspeople watched in silence as the soldier and his dog reunited. Some wiped their eyes, others smiled. Mrs. Carter ran down the street, her cries of joy mixing with Max's barks. That night, for the first time in 5 years, Max didn't sleep by the door. He curled up at Daniel's feet, his head resting on his human's boots, as if making sure he wouldn't leave again. Daniel stroked his fur, looking into the fire. "You never gave up on me, did you, boy?" Max sighed contentedly. His wait was over. The end,